So hello everyone, it's been great to hear a lot of discussions about the land-based folks and the context of social and real gambling. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on if you have to actually work with these guys, what does it mean to you, okay? Because it's quite an interesting experience. A little bit about me, I run a company called Game & Lane. I'm personally located in San Francisco, but I have people all over the world, mostly from a development perspective, some from marketing. So I'm going to give you a little history here. I don't want to bore you, but you need some context as to where these organizations have come from, and it speaks quite a bit as to where they are today. Believe it or not, MGM, which is a big casino company in the US, launched a freemium social casino in 2002. Anybody know that? No, right? Didn't even know about social casino there. It was a full suite of slot machine games and table games such as roulette and blackjack. The goal and objective of that was to test out the games in a freemium environment before they were converted into real gambling for distribution here in Europe, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I was somewhat associated with this. As a matter of fact, I was a lot associated with this. These games were phenomenally successful with zero marketing. With absolutely no effort. They were put up. It was strictly natural search that drove the traffic. And the way it worked is that after you accumulated a certain amount of points, you could redeem those points for hotel rooms and buffets in the casinos in Las Vegas. So we were spending quite a few people down there, or the people that ran that company. And at least from the perspective of the operators of that, it was a success. MGM made a very, very fast decision to say, oh no, we don't really feel like doing this, and I'd like this team to focus on completing the real gambling exercise. But as we go forward here, many of the people that were at that team are now running social casino operations for some of these land-based people, so keep it in your mind. So in 2003 or so, in 2004, you've got a bunch of the casinos, both in the UK as well as in the US, launching in the UK market. And MGM, obviously, they launched out of Isle of Man. Atlantis Casino launched out of Isle of Man. Hard Rock Casino launched out of Alderney. The Ritz was out of Alderney in 2003-ish. And then later in 2004, we get back to the social and casual gaming part of it. But the reality of all of the real money gaming for land-based American casinos anyways were closed down. Hard Rock Casino was successful and continued on. The thing that's most interesting in here is Gary Loveman's Harrah's, which is now Caesar's Palace, early understanding how important social games were in the context of online gaming or gambling. Essentially, that site was a launch of a bingo type of center with sort of electronic pogo type games, where pop-it types of games and so forth and so on. It was a subscription gaming, so there's a fixed monthly fee on that, and we'll keep going from there. All of them closed, as I said. The reasoning for it is they had an overzealous age and location verification, which was non-competitive against their British counterparts, who had a much more, not significantly, but a more relaxed one. And I'll go into what the technical details of that are. And the reason why their age and location, et cetera, were more strict is that they were afraid that the regulators in the US, it would impact their land-based operations, even though they were launching in the UK. A departure from this was the implementation by Harrah's, actually, which didn't have that problem, primarily because of the learnings that were gained from the early implementations by the other casinos in Europe with this same problem. The other interesting part about it is that perhaps their arrogance or their naivete, the American casinos developed content that they were quite familiar with in their casinos. In the United States, the standard slots you see there, the standard table games that they had and the way that they were doing them. And the point in fact that these games were of almost no interest to the UK audience at all. the slots, they didn't understand a Vegas slot at all. They were familiar with fruit machines, and that was the only type of slot content that they understood. The most popular games were blackjack and roulette. Roulette was actually the most popular of all, mostly because of their familiarity with the casinos in France and wherever else that they were doing it. So the primary revenue being generated off of that particular site was roulette. Just a little bit of a learning there. I think things may have changed for this particular time, but I think the lessons to be learned there is just because you've got content within a land-based operation and it's played in a certain location doesn't necessarily mean it has any crossover into the audience online that you're going for. The other interesting part about this, and we've talked a little bit during this, is the cost of acquisition for gaming, at least for real money gaming. And I think they were shocked in terms of their budget about the cost of doing it. We've talked a lot about this as this conference. This is nothing news to you because you market and sell in this environment, but it was not uncommon in some cases literally to pay $400 and $500 for acquisition through the affiliate network for basically a real gambling individual, especially if they come through the normal sports books. And it was very, very hard for them to recoup that kind of spend in that environment. It was especially hard for the Harrah's implementation of this bingo sort of casual subscription, because there was no way that their revenue was anything close to the amount that was acquiring those customers. Eventually, WagerWorks sold WagerWorks, which is the IGT, which was the MGM implementation, was sold to IGT. So much of the gaming content and gaming and real gambling expertise, at least online, early on became an IGT transfer. So you see IGT's success and so forth and so on in the online area and social gaming today, but their really early adventure into this was in Europe and was in the UK, and they supported some of the casinos that I spoke to before. They dismantled all of the initiatives, and they regrouped both social and real money gambling, and they didn't do much for quite a long time, actually. So you've got this long gap of complete silence and perhaps actually a bit of anger and frustration with the online channel for quite a while. They got burned by it. And then all of a sudden, Zynga comes on board in 2007 or so, and they start to become a bit more interested in it and serious about it. And we know all about Wynn's attempt to do a deal and even buy Zynga and all these other activities that occurred probably about 2009, 2010. None of them came to fruition, mostly because of the really extreme valuation of Zynga, and some people thought it was excessive, and probably if you look in hindsight, they're right in terms of what has occurred to them, but they basically backed off it and remained quiet. So then we get into some activity around 2011-ish or so. We see more interest in mostly because of the social gaming part. You see in 2011, MGM, give or take, launching My Vegas. And strikingly funny, most of the people from My Vegas were from WagerWorks back in the day, and they did the same identical deal that they did many years ago with MGM. And this is another interesting thing you need to understand. The people that originally formed WagerWorks had already worked for MGM way back in the day. So the land-based casino operators are very incestuous in terms of who they deal with and who they work with and who they like and who they don't, okay? They have concerns, I would say, about any of the online gaming space. So when you're dealing with these folks, my suggestion is if you have an interest in partnering with them, you should get involved with somebody that is either inside the casino itself or has worked with them. I'm not trying to pitch myself in that capacity. We have other people in this room that can do it as well, but I think it's a very wise decision to do that if you want to partner or do a deal with them. Then we go over to Caesars and Gary Loveman, who did the earlier Lucky Me thing in London and in the social space, and basically it's more the casual space. He is a real stickler for that, so instead of going for any type of real gambling, he goes in and buys Playtika, and this is way before the Double Down deal. Not a surprise to me, knowing him personally and what his idea is. He's definitely believes that the social channel is a better channel overall because of its ubiquity and its lack of regulation in it. And he's a testament to that, and his team is. Not all of the casinos agree with that, but he's one of them. And then in 2011, we have IGT buy Double Down. This is kind of an interesting purchase with, never mind the price, but IGT already had a tremendous amount of online slot content in the online gambling area, and they've been running in Europe for quite a long time. So it wouldn't have been that difficult for them to take that content and just launch it in a social context. What the reasoning for them was to go with Double Down, it could be that they already had traffic, I'm not quite clear, but here we go with basically a full-on investment in the social area. Then IGT, you're probably not familiar with this, but IGT is now trying to license their Double Down content to the land-based casino operators in the US. And the way this works, it's rather bizarre in the way they do this, but they completely have the customers going to a, say for instance, a Hard Rock casino site, website. They find this area to play social casino games, and then they're automatically transferred and thrown into the Double Down environment. And what happens is that Double Down owns the customer. Basically, IGT owns the customer, and the casino does not. They have no knowledge of that, and they get no rev share from that. So what I'm trying to do is build a case here is the fundamental cultural difference and shift between the land-based folks and the online people. To go further on that, if you look, before you do anything, I'd like you each to go to one of these casinos. It could be here in Europe or it could be in the US, and just look at what gaming content they have on there, and even the way that they've structured their internet marketing and the way they approach the market. So I'm not saying they're all like this, but they suck, okay? It's pretty bad, okay? And the reason it's pretty bad is because the goals and objectives of that organization and the culture in that organization is all about land-based, okay? They don't know anything about online. In some cases, they don't want to, okay? So the reason Gary Loveman goes out and buys a Playtika, okay, the reason why IGT buys a Double Down is because they want to get involved completely outside of the constraints that are from the land-based operator. So going over once again, Zynga Surprises, there is a large North American adoption of social games. So I spent, was it last year? I spent all over the world with the mid-range of land-based casino operators, and there are many of them. They're in the States. I've been Scandinavia, Israel, London, and whatever, going through platforms with them from a technical due diligence perspective, and also you know, from a business perspective. So there is that momentum, basically, even within that middle tier. So sometimes when you're talking, you think of the big guys in Vegas. They're not the only ones you want to chat with, and they're not the only ones launching in New Jersey and these other places. So if you want to do a deal, it may be a good idea to talk to these mid-level guys as well as the larger guys. So they're in it for social gamings to prepare for US real money gambling. So just think about this, okay? Many of them are launching social games not because of the social spin they get, okay? Not because of any driving traffic to there, but to gain expertise on how to then go on and do real money gambling. So when you're doing a deal with them, again, if you're in the social context there, you have to talk to that issue, okay? You have to talk to the issue is that Well, how does that prepare them? And you can be honest and say, well, this is a social game, and this is totally in the context of this, and this is for to drive traffic to your casino, it's to monetize in this area, but be prepared for that question. Social gaming is a fallback, and we just heard this, in case real money gambling doesn't go so well in the US, okay? And it's clearly an extremely slow ramp at this point. It's very fragmented. There are state packs occurring, as we talked about, to go through. But the reality is the way that it's going to be extremely slow. And with social gaming's unrestricted nature, you're going to find more and more interest in looking at the social game, even just to get into the game, to understand how to play in the online space. Driving visitors to the land-based operation. Does any of you ever in your lives, launching an online gaming, had the objective to send someone to a physical location in whatever state, country you're in? Raise your hand if you ever did that. Okay, you've got a couple, okay? Well, when you're talking to these folks, you have to answer that question, okay? You have to answer the question, is that this is going to convert to 5% in your casino. It's going to convert to 10%. So have that answer, okay? Even if you make it up, at least justify it, okay? Have that answer. You're going to have it, okay? They have a prejudice to deal with these suppliers to them. They are not technocrats. They're not game designers, okay? They run a physical place, okay, where they put a thing in there, a slot machine, a restaurant, or whatever. So they expect their suppliers to know everything about it, and they rely extremely heavily on them. So in the States, we have the aristocrats of the world, we have the Bally's of the world, we have the Williams of the world, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have an interest in exploiting the land-based area and be involved with them, the first stop you should make is with them, with the suppliers to the casino platform floor. It's not only the games, it's actually the back-end system, which records all this, which gives the loyalty points. It's the whole soup to nuts. So you're going to have to deal with those companies and at least talk about what your competitive advantage or disadvantage is against them, and it's going to be hard to compete with them. Separate or consolidated operation models. Big discussion, a lot of, I wouldn't say friction, but you have a land-based operation. It's totally different than an online operation. The chicken and the egg, the tail and the horse. Who is actually managing this business? If you have a situation where the people that are influencing the social game or online gambling are from the land-based operation, wow, you better go to school, okay? Because what their value systems are, the way they see how business running, and what they talk about is nothing that you understand, okay? And anything that you talk about is nothing that they understand. It could be that they have a fantasy about it, okay? And a lot of them have these fantasies about it. But you have to go in with an understanding that if you go in with a land-based casino, you're probably going to talk to people with that mentality. They make buy versus build decisions. You've seen mostly buys because of the early burns that they've had in terms of build, okay? They realize that they're not particularly good at it. They will go for joint ventures. They will go to those type of environments. So when you go in, once again, if you're interested in them, think about it. Well, if I did a joint venture with this, and some of you don't know what a joint venture is, but if you do, if you share some part of the business venture, and that's not a bad idea with them, they may very well be interested in you. So again, be prepared for a joint venture conversation with them. And be quite prepared for a potential purchase of your company. It's a very real, likely scenario and situation. And especially in the social gaming space, if you see that the real money gambling is slow, all right, for whatever reason, they have not decided to go with their supplier, Williams, IGT, or etc., then they might do something like that. They might very well purchase you. And trust me, they have the money to do it, and you could get a good valuation for it. So again, if you're going to go in and talk to them and you want to break into that market, then do your homework. Casinos in general have no online experience, as I told you before. They have none, zero. Let's take a breath, okay? So when you want to do the deal with them, if you're talking to somebody that either has a lofty goal, lofty notion of it or not, how are you going to spin the deal, okay? How are you going to spin it with somebody? Practice it with somebody else. Practice it with your wife or your husband at home, right? Practice something like with that. If you're talking to somebody or the shop owner down the street, practice with them and see the feedback and have a story. Talked about the culture. Be around, be out there. Just, they're here, okay? They're at ICE. If you've ever been to ICE, have anybody been to ICE in London? Awesome. Okay. So the other ones of you in the social gaming space, and you want to sell your company, you want to do a partnership, go to ICE next year, okay? Go to the gaming conference in Vegas. Great to go to Vegas in March. Go for it, okay? Understand their content, loyalty programs, have an answer for how you're going to integrate with the loyalty programs. Talk about the real money gambling business, even though you're not in it. And if you are, great. Hang out in Vegas and Atlantic City. Connect with gaming, legal, and regulatory experts. We've had them here. If you're a social gaming person, get a real money gambling guy, okay? Talk to them. And as, by the way, they're part of the network as well. They want to know that you're with an ex-attorney somewhere or whatever in the real gambling space. It has a lot of positives for you. Any questions? No? Thank you. Okay, good. No questions?
No, my question was.
Oh, you.
I have to ask one, because you put up a slide there that said about why the land-based casinos have a renewed interest in social,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering if part of that is because the success of the land-based apps, like the Double Downs, IGT or WMS or Aristocrat, they're putting all their games on social themselves, and I'm just wondering if maybe realize, well, wait a minute, those are my players.
I think it's turned a bit that way. There was a lot of skepticism about it, and then of course we see success in that domain. But I also think that they still look at the online channel as a feeder to their offline operation. They don't necessarily look at it as a separate business channel, especially if they don't have a group within their organization that is tasked with that specific focus. So when you go to them with your social gaming, whatever it is, you have to be able to say, well, you'll probably get a conversion rate of 5 or 10% to spend X amount of money in your casino. Because if they don't ask you that, that's what they're thinking. What's my conversion rate going to be? I literally spent the last year and a half with 5 or 6 of these casino companies, and they are still very much focused on that. They don't care about generating money from social casino. What they care about is keeping their customers, they know they're playing online, and getting them into the casino.
So, thank you.